Hello everyone and welcome to BunkaMania here on Bunkerzilla UK. I am Jeremy Graves and I am joined, let's think of context for this one. I am joined by the Chuck Palumbo, if I'm Sean O'Hare, Mr. Iain Boulton. How you doing, mate?
Oh, God.
Hey, do not mock the WCW Tag Team Champions. I will not have this.
Well, it's an interesting comparison. I mean, it's a nice episodic sort of thing that we do, being compared to wrestlers. And my only experience of Chuck Palumbo was when it was Billy and Chuck, so this is going to be interesting.
Mate, you've not seen younger version Chuck Palumbo yet, so we'll get onto that soon. But folks, you can probably tell there's a bit of a different theme going on this episode of Bunkerzilla. That is because at the time we are recording this, we are approximately 1 week removed from it having been 20 years since the infamous, quite literally infamous at this point, WWF Invasion pay-per-view in 2001 took place. Iain, if I say the date, March the 23rd, 2001, does that date mean anything to you specifically?
Is it by chance the last ever episode of Monday Night Nitro after WWF at the time, or Vince McMahon, technically brought WCW?
You are not that far off, because that was actually
Okay.
March the 26th. But March the 23rd is the day it was announced that Vince McMahon had bought WCW.
So
Now,
I was close.
You were very, very close, but this just goes to show that this pay-per-view took place in July, and the whole WCW sale happened in March. So there's a fair amount of time, but realistically speaking, the invasion didn't really kick off until late May, because Mike Awesome randomly ran in and won the hardcore title. I think it was on May the 28th of that year that Lance Storm made his in-ring debut doing a run-in. As you build up through the month of June, Hugh Morris debuted attacking Edge. Looking at some notes here, Booker T interfered in the triple threat WWF title match at the King of the Ring pay-per-view, where he attacked Steve Austin in the process. And then on June the 25th at Madison Square Garden, there was a confrontation between Vince and Shane McMahon, ending with Booker T attacking Vince McMahon, and that edition of WWF programming is technically regarded as the quote-unquote official start of the invasion. Now, there is much more to the story that we may touch on, in the future, but suffice to say, by early July, WCW was now being formally portrayed as a heel invading group in the WWF at the time. And in a surprise turn of events, ECW was also added to the mix. Not partly in part due to the fact that WCW was basically being portrayed as utter garbage and no one perhaps really cared that much, aside from young me. But that point aside, that was where we were at. And in a surprising twist, ECW was added to the mix, with the invasion having been taken to the extreme for approximately 1 hour before WCW and ECW merged to become the Alliance. And it was revealed that Stephanie McMahon was now the owner of ECW. Now, as some people might say, what was going on with Team WWF at this point? Well, when it comes to the status of some of their bigger names, Steve Austin was in a unique phase at this point. He had turned heel at WrestleMania earlier that year, defeating The Rock and aligning himself with Vince McMahon. And he'd become perhaps a bit more of a, let's say, a comedic character. He was playing guitars, he wasn't flipping people off as much, he was a bit more of a jovial character, while being a heel, which was kind of a weird dynamic, but that's, again, a discussion for another time. And leading into this invasion, as Vince McMahon would put it, and as you would hear in the opening promo to the pay-per-view as well, the WWF at the time had never seen or had to face an enemy like this before. They were going to war. And as Vince McMahon would so eloquently put it, I need the old Stone Cold back. And so the week before this pay-per-view, Stone Cold Steve Austin was at the quite infamous in WWE history Friendly Tap Bar, where the entire pub was closed off so that Austin could just sit at the bar and drink copious amounts of bottles of beer. And Vince McMahon, after having pleaded on the SmackDown prior, once again pleaded to Austin, even though Austin had just walked out on Vince McMahon. And there was a wonderful moment that you sometimes see in video packages of, Stone Cold, come back! Stone Cold, come back! Steve! And all manner of things like that. Leading to Vince McMahon going to the bar again, but ultimately Stone Cold not answering him. And by the end of that Monday Night Raw, the same Monday Night Raw that had seen Spike Dudley's poor girlfriend Molly Holly be put through a table by the Dudley boys because he would not rejoin Team ECW after Heyman pleaded to him. Steve Austin came out to help Team WWF because the old Stone Cold was back. And that led us to this pay-per-view. Invasion. At the Gund Arena in Cleveland, Ohio. A fun fact for you, Ian. The same arena earlier that year, on March the 26th, where the final Nitro and Monday Night Raw simulcast happened. Ooh. It was the same arena some months later where that infamous segment involving Vince McMahon had taken place. We were back for the Invasion pay-per-view, with the theme being WWF versus Team WCW ECW, later known as the Alliance, but at this point in time were known as the Coalition. Oof. But for the purposes of this, I'm calling them the Alliance, because sod that word, coalition. So, Ian, I've just done a heck of a lot of preamble and build-up there to this. So, just to it's pretty obvious, I'm very familiar with this. I remember watching stuff at the time it happened. I was a massive WCW fan growing up as well as WWF at the time. I had a massive soft spot for this. I'd also experienced some ECW on, like, the year time delay when it was showing on Bravo in the UK. Again, we may come back to that at a future point. But when it comes to your experience with the Invasion, perhaps watching older WWF, WCW, and even ECW, give us a little preview of where you're at when it comes to knowing this event and things surrounding it.
I know of it obviously from the documentaries that have come out from like WWE Network and obviously a lot of like the feature and videos that you'd see from places like What Culture, Wrestle Talk, Cultaholic, all that sort of stuff. For me at a time watching wrestling, I think I was on the way out of my first wrestling engagement per se, because I got into it around 99. And I think just after WrestleMania 17, I just started to kind of fizzle out, and it wasn't necessarily because I didn't like the product or something. It just wasn't capturing my attention anymore. I think Austin as a heel was a weird prospect for me, to be perfectly honest. So it was just kind of like, oh, okay, this is odd. And then obviously other characters like Rock and that weren't around a lot anymore, or Mick Foley for that matter, and I just kind of got a little bit disillusioned, or just kind of disenchanted with it, really. And that's nothing against the stories they were trying to tell at the time or the wrestlers, and so it just wasn't capturing my attention as it did, I suppose. And I think a lot of it still I think particularly with the Invasion storyline, I think some of it still stems to the fact that WCW came along, and the way I can describe looking at Invasion overall from a wrestling fan's perspective is that you've just been handed the most amazing wrestling dream match maker game. You've got it installed, you've got it on your console, you've got it on your PC, and you're ready to create the most amazing matches you could possibly do with WCW and ECW. The problem is you don't have the premium add-ons, like your Hulk Hogan's.
They're literally held behind a paywall.
Yes, literally. Or sit-at-home contracts. It's kind of the same thing, I suppose. So you're left... So I appreciate the people involved, all the wrestlers involved were main talents of WCW at the time. And I'm not going to take that away. But I think considering when you look at WCW during that period, and you were seeing people like Sting, and you were seeing people like Ric Flair, and you were seeing people like NWO, Hogan, Savage, all that sort of stuff. And Invasion comes along, and none of them are there. None of them are there to kind of really put an oomph into it. Because then it's like, during that time, wouldn't it be amazing to see an in their prime, Stone Cold Steve Austin against like someone like Goldberg and something like that? It's like, these like the ultra mega matches you really, really wanted to see. WWF at the time tried to put on the most captivating product it could do with the WCW and ECW wrestlers that were available to them. Looking back at this, it does come across a little bit silly. It's just me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed watching the pay-per-view. There were bits and pieces that I thought were funny. There are bits and pieces I think that are absolutely silly, and we'll talk about that.
But you're not wrong, though. That's the thing. You're not wrong. Unfortunately, just you mentioned, like, to use the premium content analogy, the big names could not. Well, I would say could/would not take part because they had freaking massive contracts that had to be honoured.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I don't blame a single one of them. A bunch of people took payouts because they knew there would be an opportunity to wrestle for WWF. And for a lot of people, that worked out into long-term career prospects. But the thing is, though, there's also a degree to where the wrestlers that they could have at that point in time, WWF didn't necessarily do a good job of establishing them. It's like, case in point, Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire, who I mentioned during the intro. Sean O'Haire was a WWF wrestler, WWE at that point, for quite a while, through 2004, 2005, if memory serves. He's got a ton of talent. It was a really, really good prospect, and you see some of it on this pay-per-view. But the fact of the matter is, you never really knew who the heck he was coming in. Yeah. And pretty much anyone who has come up with a way to have made this invasion better in a fantasy booking style thing, everyone has got it correct. Be it with or without the premium talent, everyone has come up with a better way this could have been handled. But ultimately, what we see on this pay-per-view is what was done. And that's just the history, that's the way it is. So you are not wrong, and you don't need to hide the fact that, let's call it like it is. A bunch of the talent, there could arguably be far better names involved. But there are many reasons why they are not involved. And that's partly why ECW got thrown into the mix, because how do you inject other people into this to help make it at least moderately feel better? And that's why they got the ECW tie-ins linked to it.
It's a fair point. It's a fair view. I think at the time, at the time I was still in my teenage years, and I probably had no general inkling of how the wrestling business worked. So I just kind of thought there was some weird reason why some of those big WCW wrestlers weren't turning up. I just kind of thought, they're not turning up. Fair enough. All right. Yeah,
but that's the other thing as well. Like the perception to many people when you thought WCW was the big names. And if you haven't watched it, like from a UK perspective, to try and put this more from a UK point of view now, by the time WCW ended, I think it was only Nitro that was being shown on UK TV, and it was on a week delay on Bravo. And which at that point you could get on a variety of versions of Sky Television, but there was a big point in time where Sky Digital came into play. And the Cartoon Network TNT channel just wasn't available on that platform. So anyone who switched over to Sky Digital, like what happened in my household, but my dad still had the Sky Analog, as I'll call it. I could still watch a bit of WCW here and there at his house and catch some Nitros and Thunders and whatnot. But otherwise, watching WCW, unless you were internet savvy, was pretty damn hard at that point. You could still look on the website of what was going on, but it was hard to follow. Whereas WWF, you had Raw airing on Friday night. I can't remember if at that point SmackDown was airing in the UK. I want to say it was, maybe?
Raw was definitely on. There was WWF content on Channel 4 at the time, because watching the pay-per-view again, Jim Ross mentions Channel 4 in the commentary. So at this point, wrestling was on Channel 4.
There you go. So it's probably Sunday Night Heat at that point. So there was you had Sunday Night Heat on Channel 4. You had Raw at the very least Raw. There were the magazine shows like Live Wire and stuff like that. If that was still going, Jacked, Metal, whatever one it was at that point. There were a variety of different programs, and even actually on some of those, you could see highlights from SmackDown. It was a weird way to have to catch up on stuff, but it was still far more accessible than WCW was, even by the end point. Like, I remember vividly watching the episode of Raw where Vince said, "I've bought WCW," and he did that interview segment, and I knew that Nitro was on a week delay, although I wasn't very internet savvy. So I remember watching Nitro the next week on Bravo, knowing ultimately what was going to happen at the close of the show. It was quite weird. So I kind of watched it in a weird, time capsule, but that's just the way it was. And even on the final Nitro, you know, the matches that took place kind of tell you some of the stars who were going to be going to WWF. You look at Booker T beating Scott Steiner. Look who shows up. Shane Helms ultimately being the Cruiserweight Champion. You see how that worked out and stuff. There are lots of different elements that worked out to that. But this is the roster that we have for Invasion. And it doesn't light the world on fire when you look at it on paper. But obviously, if you're someone like me, who is more familiar with the talent, there are some great things here that just perhaps didn't come off as well as they could have done. So, to get into the show proper, because the first thing I actually want to draw attention to, and this is a weird sort of tangential point to make, but I like it, the entrance ramp. I love the entrance ramp because it's got this randomly giant V in the middle of the word invasion, but then there's also the Alliance entrance and then the WWF entrance, and it's just such good fun having the two factions.
I like the separate entrance ways for the talent. I like that. I think just the weird screen, just having just constantly just going V, invasion. It's very distracting. For me, it was a distracting thing. But the thing that stands out to me is there's a great big bloody hole in the middle of this ramp, and it's not just like this big. It's not just like a small hole. This is like a hole that's nearly the whole distance if you walked along the actual main Titantron all the way over to the other side.
But the thing is, though, what you need to remember, though, Ian, is that when it comes to the entrances, you know, we've got to keep the Alliance separated. Hey, in the words of the famous punk rock song by The Offspring, you gotta keep them separated. So you had to figure out a way of separating them at the entrance ramp. So much so that if you notice that when Edge and Christian come out for the first official match of the night, that they kind of take a wrong turn. They have to double back on themselves and actually go down the actual side bit of the ramp.
It's a bit. You know what? I, arena architect Ian, could do a slightly better job. Why don't I've given myself a job title? Call me Vince. We have the ring in the middle. Let's have a rampway either side of the ring. One going up to the left, one going up to the right, and there you go. You've got your WWE, WWF entrance, and you've got your WCW, ECW Alliance entrance, and they can come down, meet in the middle, and fight like that. You can just have the commentary desks maybe at a slight different angle. Maybe you can have, if they had like different commentary teams for the brands, maybe you could just have a commentary table at one side and a commentary table at the other. I don't know. I think it would make the kind of ultimate matchup probably feel a lot more special, I suppose, rather than just like, right, that one's coming out from the left, that one's coming out from the right on this side of the wall. Mind the giant hole, walk to the ramp, off we go. I don't know.
I must ask, Ian, have you heard of a show from circa 2004, 2005 called TNA Impact?
I have.
Because they literally did that in the Impact Zone.
Well, the separate ramps from either side.
Yeah, literally one either side of the building, basically.
Well, I haven't watched much TNA Impact, so I might have to go and get signed up to Impact Plus and dive into their history books and find out.
Hey, there you go. I mean, look, speaking as a guy who liked watching it at the time, but I appreciate I'm in a minority, in hindsight, there's some turgid stuff on that. But we'll come back to TNA. Hey, maybe watch TNA pay-per-view at some point in time. That's a debate for another day. But going back to this, our first match was Edge and Christian defeating Lance Storm and Mike Awesome. Now,
yes,
Ian, I feel there's a bit of history to establish here with this match, which makes this a little bit weirder in some ways. So, Edge and Christian, obviously, tag team together. At this point, Edge had won King of the Ring, and Christian, suffice to say, was a bit jealous of this. So, in real terms, Christian is kind of a heel, although he is a face by default because he's part of Team WWF. When it comes to WCW, Lance Storm and Mike Awesome were part of Team Canada. But then at that point in time, also during Mike Awesome's WCW tenure, he was also known by a variety of other nicknames like the Career Killer or the Fat Chick Thriller, that 70s guy. You know, he had a variety of roles. But the other thing which makes this a little bit more awkward, let's say, is that when it comes to the idea that Mike Awesome specifically was part of the WCW ECW alliance, Mike Awesome is one of the most legitimately hated people in the history of ECW because while he was ECW champion, he jumped ship to WCW, appeared on Nitro as ECW champion, and attacked Kevin Nash, which led to the somewhat infamous match that happened on an ECW house show of then WWF wrestler Tazz wrestling then WCW champion... wrestling then ECW champion Mike Awesome, who at that point was a WCW wrestler on an ECW show.
And I think Tazz won the belt, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he won in like a minute.
They took the belt straight off Mike Awesome.
Yeah, he won in like a minute. So the idea, when you look at the annals of wrestling history, money talks. But when you look at realistically at the annals of wrestling history, Mike Awesome should not have been affiliated with ECW because of this.
No.
But there you go.
No.
But I thought this match was actually really good fun. I thought they had some great chemistry. Mike Awesome, it reminded me actually how great of a wrestler Mike Awesome was. Because he's got just had some fantastic just aerial ability, and his strength was really, really good. And I also forgot how much I miss watching classic Edge and Christian as well on this. This was a really fun match to watch.
Yeah, really, really good opener. Solid opener. I mean, one thing I will say about this pay-per-view is it flies by very quickly. And that's because nearly every match, apart from the main event, is under 20 minutes. Some are as short as 3 minutes. And it's like most of these matches don't even get above 10 minutes. I think there's only other than Van Dam versus Hardy, none of the matches go any further than like 13, 14 minutes, which is nice. It's like and there is 9 matches on this card. 9 matches. You can't have 9 matches in today's wrestling product. You've got to have all the adverts. Or even on the pay-per-view. You can't fit 9 matches on a pay-per-view within 3 hours nowadays. So yeah, it was a very interesting kind of experience revisiting this. But no, I thought Edge and Christian beating Storm and Awesome. It's good opener. Good nice little opener to set the scene and to set victories for WWF in their sort of score tally at this stage. And then we move on to bloody referees.
Talking about unique experiences, Ian. So I feel the need to ask you, are you aware of the history of referee Nick Patrick from WCW?
I'm not, but I'm sure there's a big story coming in regards to his placement on this pay-per-view.
I mean, it's got no bearing on the placement of the pay-per-view.
Fair enough.
But I feel this adds even more randomly unique context for this match. In what way?
Okay.
I don't actually know. So
we'll discover at the end of this discussion.
So, in the history of WCW, Nick Patrick is a crooked referee. He basically was almost a sort of unofficial member of the NWO. So he would literally help Hogan win matches and stuff like that. And at one point, he was the referee in the infamous Starrcade match with Sting and Hogan, where he did the fast count, which was actually normal count, and then was suspended and stuff. And that was following his history, having already been a crooked referee and helping the NWO win and stuff. So the idea that it was him representing the WCW referee corps, the most honourable of WCW referees at the time, including a young Brian Hebner, who I'm pretty sure was not part of WCW at that point. He was defending the honour and integrity of the WCW referee corps against Earl Hebner. with special guest referee having done a few guest referee spots in the past, including at... what would it have been? Yeah, anyway, he's done them. I can't remember what match it was. But he's been special guest referee before. In fact, WrestleMania 15, I think it was, if memory serves. With Mick Foley. What's the way to be polite about this? Why?
Yes, that's a good one. Because I get this. It's like, oh yeah, we're showing that all factors of WWF are being attacked on all sides by WCW, ECW, and no one is safe. Not even managers, not even partners. And even the referees. But this was bollocks. I'm sorry. This was bollocks. It just became like little pushing, then occasional little bump, little punches and little bumps like that. It's like the lightest of bumps, and then Hebner just does this one. I think he just wins with a roll up or something. I can't remember, but it was just like it's over within 3 minutes.
Oh yeah,
and it's. Oh, and I think the referees get thrown out. The supporting referees get thrown out by Foley as well.
There's a referee brawl on the outside.
Yes,
but you know what I will say though. You know what I will say. There is one really good bump in this match, and that is when Nick Patrick is in the corner, and Earl Hebner basically pulls him out, slingshotting him in the air, and Nick Patrick just lands flat as a pancake. It's the best bump in this match.
And that is the only thing that is worth talking about in this match.
So as we move on to the next match, because let's just be fair, we don't want to talk about that match anymore. Next up, it is WWF Tag Team Champions against WCW Tag Team Champions, as it is the APA against Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire. Now,
This was a much more stiffer affair, because at this time APA are now going into their protection agency gimmick, and they're kind of like one of the big rallying boosters, I guess, for Team WWF at the time. So it was always at that time, APA was a team that I just enjoyed watching, especially because it was just. Yeah, Farouk and Bradshaw just turn up, kick ass, drink beer, off they go, and that sort of thing. So like they were kind of like a tag team equivalent of Stone Cold. Not the same major levels of popularity as Stone Cold, but they were kind of on that no nonsense level, which I really, really enjoyed. But yeah, really, really good hard hitting match in this one. Again, pretty quick, 7 minutes, and so I enjoyed this one.
I agree. So I need to ask. How familiar are you with Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire in the context of WCW?
I am not too aware of them. I know they were the final sort of tag team champions in WCW before coming over to WWF. Yeah.
So, to give you some context here, in the year 2000, there was an attempt in WCW to try and inject a lot of new talent in what was affectionately known at one point known as the New Blood, and that was a freaking disaster for a variety of ways. We may come back to that at a later date. But part of this was towards, I'll say, 2/3 of the way through the year, maybe a little bit before that. There was a new faction formed with a group of young talent called the Natural Born Thrillers. Now, as part of this, included, if I remember correctly, was Sean O'Haire, his tag team partner, Mark Jindrak, Chuck Palumbo, and Sean Stasiak, who people might remember formerly in the WWF being known as simply the word Meat. In 1998. Yep, not even joking.
Oh, yes.
There you go. Yeah, I brought back a load of bad memories. You're welcome. So it got to a point where Sean O'Haire and Mark Jindrak were WCW Tag Team Champions, and I believe, if I remember correctly, at one point, Chuck Palumbo and Sean Stasiak were Tag Team Champions. But there was a point in time where the tag teams kind of, not split, but they changed direction a little bit. So it then became Palumbo and O'Haire as a team, and Jindrak and Stasiak as a team. And so they ended up fighting over the WCW Tag Team titles, and kind of the Natural Born Thrillers element of it was ending at that point. And there were other people involved as well, like Kevin Nash for a while was kind of the coach of the Thrillers, if you will, but they eventually turned on him and such. In fact, I believe they turned on him just before the November 2000 WCW UK tour. I was there. I vaguely remember this. So eventually, it would come down to Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire being the final WCW Tag Team Champions. And Sean O'Haire, out of all four of those guys, was one that really stood out. Palumbo went on to have a great career as well. Jindrak also had a very good career. If I remember correctly, I think he's kind of been far more successful down in Mexico more than anything.
Okay.
Sean Stasiak has continued wrestling, but I'll be quite honest in saying I did not follow his career. I cannot comment. But Sean O'Haire is one that really stood out because he was very explosive in what he could do. He had some really cool movements and also was compared quite a bit in some ways to Jeff Hardy because he also did a Swanton Bomb, renamed the Seanton Bomb. See what they did there? Except he wouldn't, what's the way to put it? When you see Jeff Hardy and the way he does it, he looks a bit it looks a bit all or nothing. There isn't perhaps, he's not a gymnast, I'll put it that way. Whereas the way Sean O'Haire does it, it's like he is being a proper gymnast. So he just kind of flies through the air like a gymnast. It's pretty cool, actually, the Sean Top Bomb, but it's got a different edge and a style to it. So seeing these two guys come in, for me, was a great thrill. No pun intended with the Natural Born Thriller stuff. Just because I sort of knew the history of it and knew that, these young guys are going to face the APA. Oh, God, please don't break them, kind of thing. Was more my line of thinking. So I like this match, like you said, for how hard-hitting it was and stuff. But ultimately, I was a bit sad that they didn't get the win. But that's just kind of par for the course at this point. But it was really cool to see them. But I don't know if that's kind of added a bit more to where Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire have been. I mean, Chuck Palumbo in himself has got more history involved because he ended up having a feud against Lex Luger for a while. And kind of taking over Lex Luger's mantle of having, like, nearly 0% body fat and all kind of stuff like that. It was very weird, WCW towards late 2000. But yeah, so I don't know if that context helps at all to provide you that they were technically very credible representatives of WCW, even though WWF would never have let you know that.
Yeah, they were decent opponents, but they never really sort of came across in the pay-per-view like these were, like, big deals to really be focusing on. And that's something I think is probably fair to say with some of the wrestlers that appear in this pay-per-view, is basically they are there. They have a history for WCW, but WWF don't necessarily lean into that. I mean, this is, if they were going off to do like separate brandings and stuff like this, because ultimately I think this sort of tumbles towards too much on the rosters and eventually the first brand split many years down the line. But in terms of getting over new talent, it doesn't feel like a big, apart from like the big guns like Booker T and DDP and stuff like that, and Rhino and Rob Van Dam, a lot of the mid-carders for WCW were not necessarily kind of pushed more, or not pushed more, but given more exposure. Because it's like I know the names, but it's like I don't necessarily feel like I should be invested in them during the pay-per-view, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. So from there, from going from like, let's call it like a hard-hitting match that maybe styles clashed a little bit there, we go to a match that I genuinely feel is one of the best matches on the show. And that being X-Pac against Billy Kidman. We have the WWF Light Heavyweight Champion, a title which a lot of people have forgotten about, against WCW's Cruiserweight Champion Billy Kidman. The thing I liked about this match, and despite the fact that, no one liked X-Pac.
Yeah, crowd booed him.
I will say also, big shout out to the fact we got to hear the, I believe, Uncle Cracker produced theme song for X Factor when X-Pac came out.
Oh, gotta talk about the X Factor!
It's a classic song. I will not hear anything countenance to that. But the thing I liked about this match is this actually gave an air of what the WCW Cruiserweight matches were like. And it had helped as well that X-Pac used to be in WCW in the Cruiserweight division. He was under the name Six when he joined WCW and part of the NWO and such. But this match, I mean, it only went roughly 7 minutes looking at the notes I've got here, but it was still, it had enough action, enough high flying, enough quick maneuvers to actually be something different from what we had seen on the show so far, stand out from the rest of the pack, no pun intended, and also just in general was a great representation of what the cruiserweight matches, and let's call it like it is, what the light heavyweight division should have been, but unfortunately, just the way it goes. So this is genuinely one of my favourite matches of the show.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's one of the better matches on the card. Again, that's pretty much down to the talent of Kidman and X-Pac, obviously being of the cruiserweight variety. So yeah, it gave audiences a good indication of some of the genuinely good cruiserweight action that WCW were producing over the many years. So yeah, I think out of most of the matches on this card, this is probably one of the most technically interesting and actually enjoyable ones to watch as well.
And from the perspective of Kidman standing from a WCW wrestler point of view, his journey, like in the final year of WCW, was quite a unique one because that New Blood feud that I mentioned that had started, where the new up and comers were the heels taking on the old veterans who were millionaires, eventually known as the Millionaires Club, who were faces. Figure that one out. Billy Kidman ended up having a feud with Hulk Hogan in the year 2000.
As you do.
Exactly. I think he got a win over Hulk Hogan, if memory serves. And then eventually he went on to have a feud against Shane Douglas, which at some point, again, if memory serves, culminated in a scaffolding match to determine who Torrie Wilson, at that point or not at that point in time, was either aligned with Billy Kidman or Shane Douglas. And then eventually... and then as part of the Filthy Animals stable as well, he then reformed a tag team with Rey Mysterio, and eventually, if I remember correctly, was the last WCW Cruiserweight Tag Team Champions with Rey Mysterio. Because they were belts that were developed in, like, early 2001, the Cruiserweight Tag Team titles. The inaugural champions being Kid Romeo and Elix Skipper, later of TNA fame, the latter.
Scaffolding match sounds like this was a Vince Russo thing, wasn't it? It was just the big book of Russo. Flick through the pages. What are we going to do? Scaffolding? Do we have any scaffolding?
Check you know what?
Back. Actually, okay.
You know what? I need to look this up now just to set your mind at ease. I need to look up Billy Kidman scaffolding. So, okay, what has come up here is Fall Brawl 2000 has come up.
Okay.
It really says something that the actual Wikipedia page for this event is tiny. However, there was a scaffolding match, and I'm going to read you what the result was. And that's all I'm going to give you, okay? Shane Douglas and Torrie Wilson defeat Billy Kidman and Medusa.
Okay, I still have questions what a scaffolding match is.
It's basically, there is a giant, like, flat platform at the entrance ramp, raised into the air, and they fight on the scaffold. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Billy Kidman was thrown off of this scaffold.
This just sounds dumb. It just sounds like, it's like, oh, we need him to fight, but we want to make it interesting. Well, there's a scaffolding tower right by the commentary booth, and there's just a very thin plank of wood. Why don't we just have a match up there? And then, I don't know, it's like the audience will go, wow, it's so intense. It's on a plank of wood. No one will ever know how thrilling this is until they see it. I mean, someone pitching this match must have thought the idea was the most thrilling thing in the world. It's like, we got scaffolding here on the set. Why don't we just build a tower and let's just have a match there? You know, let's just go nuts. It'll be fine. Kids love this
Ian,
shit.
I need to ask you, and if you think that's going to blow him, I need to ask you something. Have you ever heard of a pay-per-view called New Blood Rising?
I have not, and I now worry that you've mentioned this.
We might need to watch this at some point. Because, so, right, this is going off. You know, this is going off topic. I'm going to talk about this anyway for a second because this needs to be said so you can understand how dumb WCW was in place. As much of a fan of it as I am.
Yeah.
At New Blood Rising, again, if memory serves correctly, Vince Russo likes a pole match, like on a pole match.
This isn't Viagra on a pole match, is it?
Oh no! This is arguably better or worse.
Is this someone's mother on a pole match?
It's Judy Bagwell on a pole match, but she can't go up the pole, so she's put on a forklift.
It's like, bring it in, beep, beep,
pretty much.
Beep. I mean, there's weird, there's lamer things on a pole. I mean, there's like guitar on a pole match. Oh, what was the?
There are lamer things on a pole match.
It's like, okay, there's a person on a pole. Fine, there's some intrigue there. The fact that it's a wrestler's mother just makes it even stranger. And a bit more intrigue is like, well, this certainly turned into Jerry Springer.
Mate, you don't know the half of it. Trust me. So, but yeah, anyway, sorry. So Billy Kidman and X-Pac was a really good match. Now that I've just totally derailed this. Next up, I mean, speaking of forklifts, you could argue this was also a clash of styles because Raven beat William Regal. With the help of Tazz getting involved as well, it should be said.
Yes, and that obviously would come back to bite him on the backside when Tajiri took him on later on in the evening. I don't know why I went into the posh voice. It's mostly because it must be because William Regal was in his sort of posh sort of, oh, well, okay, Mr. McMahon, I will go down to the ring and I will beat this rapscallion sort of
was
thing.
Was it not because you were, you were still trying to not think of on a pole match?
Possibly. Butler on a pole match. Hello, sir. Could you get me down, please? If you get me down, I'll be your butler for the rest of the day. I'll go get the ladder.
But this match, though, with Raven and William Regal, to me, this is also a perfect summary of a styles clash.
Yeah,
now, I don't think this match is bad, but you can tell there are moments where they're not totally gelling. But I think because of that, it actually adds to the nature of the match.
Yeah, because Regal's obviously was an exceptional technician. Raven's probably more of the smash and bash in variety, because obviously he'd had that sort of hardcore kind of... he had this sort of hardcore style image as well, especially in WCW, where most of the time he'd turn up, he'd slump into the corner and kind of have... I'd like to say emo rant, but probably not only a proper emo rant or something like that. He was just... He was having a grunge phase. That's the word. He was having a grunge phase. And
Raven?
grunge... Possibly. I don't know.
I mean, Raven's had a grunge phase since like 1995, you know.
Oh, fair enough. Well, there we go. Fine.
Oh, mate. So next up, I'm not just poo-pooing that other match, by the way. There's not really not much to say about it, quite frankly.
Yeah. It is what it is.
What I think we can fairly call a really random six-man tag match.
Yes.
Because we have Chris Kanyon, who was a really good wrestler, with Hugh Morris, and Sean Stasiak, the other part of the Natural Born Thrillers. Hey, there you go. Mm-hmm. It's almost like my tedious links are working. Team WCW defeating the Intercontinental Champion, because no one remembers that title reign, of Albert, Big Show, and at this point, the one Billy Gunn.
This was an odd match. This was just like, oh, people are just doing moves. Oh, and they've lost. It's a match. Here is a match. Who do we cheer? I don't f***ing know. Just watch the match.
To me, this is a prime example of this show just having something missing about it.
Yeah.
Because the biggest moment of the match, the cameras don't pick up because something happens on the outside of the ring and everyone looks at it. And so that kind of sums it up. But yeah, there's nothing much to note about this. But I will say, from my point of view, it was cool to see Kanyon in the ring again. Because in WCW, like, he had to deal with some weird characters. At one point in time, he was a character known as Mortis, who was like a rival of Glacier and Wrath at that point. And he was under a mask, and then he got unmasked and stuff like that. And then eventually he was part of... I think it was the New Jersey... No, it wasn't the New Jersey Triad. Sorry, that was two different people. But he was part of... He was like a friend of Diamond Dallas Page's. He got thrown off the top of a WCW triple cage. That's a whole other thing we'll get to at some point in time, no doubt. And then he was kind of injured, and there was a whole thing around that. And then he eventually turned on Diamond Dallas Page and then became like Positively Kanyon and stuff like that. And he was always a really, really good wrestler. But it just couldn't get like above a certain point when it came to like a ceiling. There was just something always missing. It was really cool just to see him like, no, you got to the WWF, mate. Like, it's really, really cool. But that said, though, a very, very forgettable match.
I just feel probably creative. Just put all the wrestlers' names in like just like a small burlap sack with like you know, if you're drawing like lots for like the FA Cup or something like that, and they just took out the balls and just went. Number 4, that's Albert. Who else is on his team? Number 7, it's Billy Gunn. All right, and
shouldn't he have been number 1?
He could be, but WWF don't care. And number 29, that's Big Show. Okay, you guys are a team now. Now go fight them. Go fight them. If that's my thoughts on the match. It's
the team of Albert Big Gun.
Albert Big Gun. Oh, yeah. So we have Tajiri versus Tazz next, and it starts off with Regal giving Tajiri like the ultimate pep talk.
I must quote part of this because William Regal told Tajiri to go and attack the quote unquote miserable little gobshite Tazz. Oh, it's just wonderful just to hear Regal just say the word gobshite in only the way he can. This match, it's like you said earlier, Tazz just getting like his comeuppance, quite frankly, for having gotten involved earlier. And this was also playing off of an angle on Raw when Tajiri feigned that he was joining the Alliance during a match involving Tazz, and then ultimately he was still with WWF. Although, the weird thing is, technically Tajiri could have joined the Alliance because he was actually a big name in ECW. He had loads of great three-way dance matches against Little Guido, who would later be known as Nunzio in WWE, and Super Crazy, who in WWE would be known as Super Crazy. They had like some really, really great matches like back in the day. So the idea of him joining the Alliance was actually quite feasible if you were a hardcore follower of ECW back in the day.
Not gonna lie, hearing Tazz's WWF theme again was pretty cool. With the yeah. It's like WWF Tazz was fun. WWF Tazz was fun to see.
I agree. I will say I was very disappointed no one called his suplex a Tazplex. Next up, we've got arguably one of the... Well, not arguably, it is one of the best matches on the show. Rob Van Dam, representing the Alliance, defeating Jeff Hardy for the WWF Hardcore Championship. Watching this match back 20 years later, I remember, like, just over the years, people just going, oh, that match was so good. And you know what? It still freaking holds up. These two just have such good chemistry. They were doing really innovative stuff for the time. It's got a good pace to it. It feels unorthodox. It feels very natural in everything that happens. And it's just a really, really good match. I'm genuinely really happy this holds up. And holy crap, man, even in 2001, what a star RVD was. And he'd only been barely in the company like a month.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was probably the best advertisement for the existing talent of Jeff Hardy, and obviously the newer talent coming in with Rob Van Dam. I think this is, like you said, I think this is probably the best match on the card by far, and it's not even close, to be honest. And it starts off in a fairly brutal fashion as well, because you've got a backstage segment where the Hardy Boys are chatting, and then RVD just turns up and just smacks Matt Hardy viciously with a chair and just goes, come and get me, and off to the ring he goes in that sort of way. And I think it just kind of set the stage for the level of like chair shots, ladder carnage, and all the crazy high flying spots as well. But ultimately I really dug this match. I thought it was really cool.
Would you like to know a fun fact about this match?
Go ahead.
1 year later to the day, these two would wrestle again, where the European title and hardcore title were merged into one.
The hardcore European champion?
Basically. I missed the European title. But yeah, this match was just really, really good. And I think still one of the standout moments for me is the Van Daminator on the entrance ramp, and Hardy just falls through it.
Yes.
It's just such a great visual.
There's a giant hole there's a giant hole there for a reason. Definitely there's a reason that hole's there.
There you go. I'm not going to attempt to make a segue based on this, but next up, we have a bra and panties match with Mick Foley as the guest referee. Trish Stratus and Lita, Team WWF, defeating Torrie Wilson and Stacy Keibler from WCW. I'm going to be honest, I really did not enjoy watching this.
This is not good to watch.
I mean, even at the time, I wasn't enamored with it, but watching it with 2021 eyes, no. What the heck?
It's weird. It's uncomfortable. Even like the storytelling leading up to it is a bit weird. Obviously, at this moment in time, I think Trish and Lita are still kind of rivals to an extent, so they kind of put aside the differences. But there's just the backstage. There's like one backstage bit between Wilson and Keibler, and they're just going on about how sexy they are, and it's like. This is pure attitude bollocks in a way.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think in today's wrestling world now, where women's wrestling has come on leaps and bounds, this is just uncomfortable to watch. That's just me.
Not even defending this, but like in the context of WCW, there is history involving Torrie and Stacy. For lack of a better word, like flaunting themselves to the camera, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Stacy Keibler in particular, for a long period of time, she was known as Miss Hancock, and would basically just start doing dances on commentary tables and like in the ring and stuff.
Wasn't she like a former cheerleader for like a basketball or?
I think so. Yeah, and she was one of the Nitro girls. I think her name was Sky. if I remember correctly, because she won like an audition effectively, or like won a contest to be a new Nitro girl, and that's how she got brought in and stuff. How I remember all this random information, I don't know. I just do. But then this leads on to the main event. What was literally known, which I still think is a dumb name to this day, but even so, it is the Inaugural Brawl.
Yeah, I kept hearing that and kind of going, what? It's like, is this like an annual thing? It never became a bloody annual thing.
Do you know why?
It's just
you can only have one invasion, that's why. And you screwed it up.
We're going to keep invading. Just keep invading WWF and WCW. This inaugural brawl happened once a year, in the same place, at the same time, on the same day of the same month, all that sort of stuff. I guess maybe from like a long-term booking perspective, maybe thinking, well, maybe if this event works and the invasion angle comes off nicely, maybe, and we're able to set up WCW and ECW as separate brands. They didn't. They'd be able to kind of do like this yearly thing where it's kind of like Survivor Series, where brand supremacy is key.
It's funny you mention that, because that would be, thinking about it just out loud, like, this event happened in July. In November, it was the final match of the invasion. And it would be like an elimination match to determine which brand reigns supreme, including what I vividly remember JR describing as, will it be WWF Raw or will it be Alliance Raw?
Oh, come on. They could have come up with a better name. They could have just said WECW. There you go. World Extreme Championship Wrestling. I'd come up with a better name than this shit.
mate, it's like I said earlier, though, mate. Literally, any idea anyone has come up with since this invasion happened as to how it could be better is better than what they did. That is the legacy of this invasion, pretty much. It sans a couple of things here and there, but like this inaugural brawl, from what I recall and from watching back, I believe they called it this because everything had kind of been very, like, underground and, like, ghetto in the sense of it wasn't, like, planned brawls that happened and stuff. Like, anytime there were, like, big mass brawls, they just kind of happened spur of the moment. There was the odd match that happened on WWF television that were arranged, but on the whole, everything was just kind of, like, it was warfare, you know, that whole opening video package of, like, Winston Churchill going into war and stuff like that. So I think the idea was this was the first official battle in the war of the invasion.
Fair enough.
Which, of course, WCW and ECW won because the team of Booker T, Bubba Ray Dudley, Diamond Dallas Page, Devon Dudley, and Rhino. Oh my god,
so strong! They were so strong, weren't they?
Defeated the team of Chris Jericho, Kane, Kurt Angle, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and The Undertaker. After Stone Cold Steve Austin, the old Stone Cold Steve Austin, which should have given it away, people, turned on Team WWF to join the Alliance. Team WCW and ECW, remembering that WCW back in the day fired Steve Austin via a fax.
Watching the pay-per-view back again, it's a bit bleeding obvious that Stone Cold's turning on WWF, to be honest. Because there's just the big focus of like Stone Cold's going to lead us to victory. Stone Cold is the man who will give us victory, and it's like the more and more they make a big deal out of Stone Cold, and Stone Cold just turns up, and you just kind of go, "Yeah, Austin." It's like Austin isn't going to save you, Vince. He's just going to go and help the other team, and he does. I mean, in terms of all the matches on the card,
DTA, don't trust anyone.
That's anyone, yeah. Especially with the people involved in this main match. With the people involved in this main match, this felt like a big deal, which is good. I mean, and that's a credit to people like Booker T, the Dudleys, Diamond Dallas Page, and Rhino being involved in that, and that's really, really cool. So I think for a main event match for a crossover, when you don't really have your like uber big WCW stars involved, I think it does all right. I think it's okay. It's not great, but it's all right. I mean, you still have to deal with DDP, awkward stalker.
It's interesting. It's interesting you mention that actually about like not having the biggest stars because, in the context of WCW, by the end, Booker T and DDP are two of the biggest stars. I mean, even throughout their history. Because Booker T in himself has won the tag team championships numerous times, was television champion. a number of times. Like he really built himself up until he eventually got that shot at the infamous Bash at the Beach pay-per-view in 2000, where he was eventually able to win the championship. DDP had, been a really big name for a long time at that point. 97 in particular really being where his star rose, and he had some big high-profile matches against Macho Man Randy Savage, and then eventually would win the WCW title in 1999, I want to say it was, in a four-way match.
Because he also had a good match with Goldberg at Halloween Havoc. But I remember the story. 98. I remember the story of the match because one of the previous matches, I think it was Hogan Warrior overrunning, that the pay-per-view broadcast cut out before Goldberg and DDP finished. And that must have been hard. That was horrible. But it's like, but no, you're right. In terms of Booker T and DDP, they have been cornerstones of WCW since the Monday Night Raws begin, and arguably, I think they are you're right. They are the stars that emerged out of WCW when WWF brought it, probably with the most fan backing, to be perfectly honest. Because obviously, the random silly booking nonsense of Hogan and all that sort of stuff, I think, kind of does jar their involvement and their legacy with WCW. Whereas with Booker T and DDP, they worked hard to earn the fans' attention and their backing and the admiration. So to see them kind of lead the charge here, I admit is a good thing. So if you don't have your big players, you've got the players from WCW that the fans have always invested their time in, and those are the important things to take into account.
Agreed. But this again goes back to the point of WWF didn't really do a good job of establishing this point. Because DDP, he had been a heel a couple of times in WCW, but realistically, for the better part of the last 5 years of the company, he was a face for the majority of it, or at least was being cheered by fans. And he was also, referred to in WCW as the people's champion of WCW. He would be the one. He was like the first one to fire a shot on the NWO when they were running roughshod throughout late '96 through early '97. He was one of the first ones to do that. He would become the champion. He was still up there for a while and whatnot, and he was still there to the end, right until the very end. But then in WWF terms, the first way they bring him in, like you mentioned, was a stalker to the Undertaker's then wife Sarah, which is like, dude, who comes up with this shit? But when it comes to Booker T, he was obviously WCW champion and US champion because he beat Scott Steiner on the final Nitro, but he had been, again, one of those cornerstones who was there with WCW for so long and was a fixture there, that even if you'd anecdotally tuned into WCW, you probably at least knew who he was. Conversely, from an ECW side of things, when you look at the team, you've got the Dudley Boys, obviously at that point, very much established in terms of having been members of WWF at that point. But multiple-time ECW Tag Team Champions involved in some of the most infamous matches and or moments in ECW history. And Rhino was the last ECW champion and television champion, and was someone who Paul Heyman pushed to the moon in ECW. And, still very young in his career, but Rhino was something special. And the fact he was also put up there as well, it was really, really cool to see.
Yeah.
So, but this again, it lends credence to the fact that the names that were involved in the alliance weren't not big. It's just the presentation didn't make them come across as big. And because of how quickly everything happened, and also realistically how much of a bad job WWF did establishing them as to why they should be a credible threat. So many, again, it's like I've said multiple times now, everyone who has thought of an idea relating to this invasion could have done a better job, and has done a better job. Even just with the talent involved, there's ways to do it, but the fact that King of the Ring was in June, and Booker T got involved in the main event, probably just under a month later of that, it's this Invasion pay-per-view. The Invasion has been established in 4 weeks, realistically speaking.
It's rushing a story when it needs time to breathe and time to evolve. And it was just kind of, we've got these wrestlers, we might as well just push it through and just get the wrestlers on these rosters now and get them going. And they, you never know. Maybe from one booking perspective, they think, if we just have these names, people will be interested and so forth. But you're right. They really did not take the time to establish some of these players. They took time to establish players like Booker T and DDP. But when you look at the mid card, I'm not sure why I should be really interested in Chuck Palumbo. I don't know why I should be interested in Sean Stasiak and all that sort of stuff. It's just, even in the pay-per-view, even though I appreciate there are small matches and then quick matches to sort of whittle through, there's no sort of get to know the people. And even I think with the Raws going on around at the time, there still wasn't much to kind of really engage with. So I think that's kind of like I think for the casual viewer coming in, who maybe from the WCW fan, obviously WCW fan like yourself coming over to WWF, you kind of felt like they weren't given their due properly, and I think that's the lingering effect of the Invasion storyline. I think it's like, this could have worked. This could have been a really cool storyline with time, with patience, but yeah, it got botched. This was
realistically speaking, this should have lasted for a year minimum.
Yeah,
it lasted.
God, that would have been amazing.
4 or 5 months.
That could have been an amazing long-term story.
Because there were other things that happened as well, like in the timeline leading up to this. Like, they had tried to establish WCW as almost like its own brand. So they tried to have some WCW matches like on Raw and on SmackDown. The most infamous one being a Booker TV Buff Bagwell match that got freaking booed out the building before it even started. Like, there were things they tried to do that then didn't happen. Because realistically speaking as well, like, it's been said in multiple places before, but in theory, the idea was that WCW would be re-established as its own brand, much like the brand split is as we've seen it for the better part of a decade now, a decade more.
It sounds really silly, but it's like this could have been like the perfect third brand for WWE, just to say, like rather than just kind of start shoving WCW wrestlers into Raw and SmackDown, stuff like that. Give them more time to build an audience, get WWF to actually throw a little bit of support by us, like, all these talents we've just acquired from WCW, we're going to make sure these stars are going to shine bright on our roster when it's time. But no, it's like they try a few things, it doesn't work, and then they go through with this Invasion storyline, which, again, I don't want to keep repeating it, but it was a wasted opportunity.
Patience is a virtue.
Yeah. Seems like we see patient storytelling in AEW right now, and long-term storylines are, even then for WWF or WWE, long-term storylines is a hard thing to come by.
It really
and I think that's kind of a nice kind of final sum up, I guess, on the Invasion.
Indeed, it was a very, very fun show to go back and watch, and it's on WWE Network. I mean, heck, if you've got the old DVD, probably like I've got somewhere, pull that out and watch it. Why not? But either way, it's definitely a significant event in wrestling history. Be it for good or bad reasons, it is very significant. And it's this time period as well, no matter how good or badly it was ultimately executed in various ways and various forms, it is very, very significant. And with that being said, I hope all of you watching and listening to this have enjoyed our little chat about this and a random diverging talk about scaffolding, because, that's the way we roll here. But Ian, I guess
before we start signing off, I want a BunkaMania episode with scaffolding. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but maybe we just build a scaffolding tower and we just record at the top of one. It won't be that big. It'll probably just be probably maybe our height, but just a little bit higher. It'll be about 6 foot off the ground.
The world's highest scaffolding match.
High stakes, high danger, high podcasting.
I mean, high podcasting sounds like something else entirely, mate, but I'm just saying.
This is true. But anyway, sorry, I apologise. You need to sign off.
It's all good fun, isn't it? It's all good fun. But and the thing is, though, we've both had good fun watching this, and we are going to try and do some more I'll call it classic / retro look backs on things. We don't necessarily know what yet, but even just from talking about little things about the history of some WCW personalities with you, Ian, I can already think of some fun events, hopefully more good ones than bad, I promise, that would be worth checking out from WCW, because it does seem that, not that I'm going to say there's a hole in your knowledge of WCW, but I think you would get a real kick out of experiencing some old WCW that really stands out, in my opinion. And I think you get a good thrill out of it.
Yeah, I'll be up for that. Absolutely.
And it's not to say we're just going to watch WCW, because I'm a massive WCW fan, but I also love watching WWF and stuff. Heck, there are some great ECW pay-per-views I'd love to go back and watch as well, because it is very much a time capsule of a very different time in wrestling. So we'll see what we do next time. But I will say I might let you be the one to pick a show to watch, given I did pick this one. So if there's anything that comes to mind for you before we next record, we can dabble into that.
Indeed. Yeah, I'll have to have a think.
There we go.
Choices, so many options.
Find out next time, folks, because at that point we'll probably have recorded it, so you'll know what it is, what it's going to be.
Yes, absolutely.
And we will say, folks, in terms of the next episode of BunkaMania, you can join Ian and myself once again talking about more modern wrestling, I'll phrase it as. We'll be talking the most recent episode at time of recording of AEW, which featured Jericho and Nick Gage in the main event, as well as talking about a heck of a lot of stuff relating to Money in the Bank and many things after that. Things happened. And things must be discussed.
Things happened. I got angry. It's not fun. No, it is. It's worth it. Definitely tune in, listen. We hope to offer engaging kind of opinions and views and kind of fun discourse. That's what we're here for, fun discourse. But yeah, suffice to say, I think I got very angry about something on the next episode.
I mean, hey, let's just say it totally maybe does or doesn't involve Jeffrey Nero Hardy 20 years later.
Yes, who may or may not be the NXT champion in waiting.
He may have, as TNA might say, crossed the line. On that note, folks, I've been Jeremy Graves. He's been Iain Boulton. You've been listening to BunkaMania. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you soon.